Shannon's Lumber Industry Updates.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today we have episode 142, and I have a special guest from Thermalwood Canada to come in and talk to us all about thermally modified wood and this weird product called Obsidian. And no, I'm not talking about the volcanic rock. I certainly have spent some time talking about modified woods in the past, and specifically thermally modified wood. Today, I have a special guest to really be the expert on thermally modified wood because he runs a thermal modification company up in Canada. So today, I want to welcome Bob Lennon, who is the president and CEO of Thermalwood Canada. Welcome to the show, Bob. I'm excited to have a luminary in thermally modified wood on here with us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to the show. Appreciate being here.
So listeners, longtime listeners, I've been speaking about modified wood for quite some time. I'm a big fan of it. I've tried just about everything on the market from, the furfural alcohol stuff to the acetylated stuff to every species I can think of thermal modification, even the ones that go horribly wrong. So I am definitely a proponent of it. And I kind of think I've certainly talked about this in the past, but I'd love to kind of hear it directly from the horse's mouth. Can you tell us what thermal modified wood actually is?
Well, thermally modified wood is wood that's been subjected to temperatures that are much higher than you would get in a conventional kiln. Conventional kiln, just to give you an order of magnitude, a conventional kiln operates at about 60 degrees Celsius, and we treat wood up to temperatures of 215 degrees Celsius. So we're almost 4 times higher. But in thermal modification, what you're doing is that you're actually changing the wood at a molecular level. Mm-hmm. Because in the process that we have, there's a number of different processes that are out there, but we operate a kiln that is considered an open system. Okay. And in open systems, we only use heat and steam in the process, but we do it over a long period of time. The beauty about the long period of time is that you really take your time to treat the wood. You're not stressing the wood more than normal because you are bringing it up to temperatures of 215, but you're taking your time to cook it. And like I tell people, it's just like cooking a roast. You have a choice. You cook it in an hour and you cook in 5 hours. But in 5 hours, you're going to get a roast that's about the same size as the one that you purchased from the butcher, and it's going to be plump and juicy and very tasty. While in an hour, you're going to get a golf ball that might break your teeth. It's going to be very tasty. And so in the process that we have, it's part of the Thermowood process, which is also connected to the Thermowood Association. That is an association out of Finland that connect together all the operators that run underneath their specifications and their standards, but also operating kilns that have been built by manufacturers that have been sanctioned by them to operate. And
sure. Yeah, I've read their handbook. It's thrilling stuff, let me tell you. All 87 pages of it. It's really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's great information for architects and others that are looking at what they can do. But again, bringing it back to the process itself, it changes the wood at a molecular level. So there's 3 phases in the process. The first phase is the drying phase. So we take the wood from whatever moisture content it is, but it needs to be kiln dried to start with. Whatever moisture content it is, we take it to 0 in the first phase of the process, which is our drying phase.
Right.
Then, once it reaches 0, the instruments inside the kiln tell us that it's at 0% moisture. Then we can start climbing the temperatures to the softwoods and hardwoods are different, but there's a thermal S and a thermal D. The S is for stability, the D is for durability. So if you're going to an outdoor product or putting it outside and it's going to be in the environment, then you need to go to a thermal D. And so that means a higher temperature. So once you reach that temperature mark, you hold it there for 3 hours. Once it's done, Then what you do is you start reconditioning. So in the reconditioning phase, you reintroduce about 4 to 6% moisture back into the wood so that it is workable, and then you cool it down by dousing wood into it. But that 4 to 6% moisture will be the constant in the wood for the rest of its duration. We've done testing with this. We put the wood into a cell that was at 75, 85% relative humidity, and for 3 months, and took it out, and the moisture content had not changed. And this
Right.
is in hardwoods. And they would, your hardwood floor that you have in your house uh, probably has a crack that appears every summer somewhere in the house. And then that crack disappears in the wintertime when everything gets damper and cooler, or it's the other way around. I don't know, one or the other, but there's always a crack that shows up. But that's because it's soaking up moisture or it's drying up. But in this particular case with thermal modification, it is very, very stable. So that's one of the characteristics that comes out of this process. You get very, very stable wood. It's not going to swell or contract as you would with regular white wood, if I can call it that. And then you also remove all the organic properties in the wood, all the sugars that are in the wood that would cause the wood to rot. So now it has a higher level of rot resistance. Insects like ants, wood ants, those kind of stuff aren't interested in the wood because there's no nutrients there for them to eat. A little bit different for termites, but termites still have a bit of a reluctance of wanting to eat this wood immediately. They wait for quite a while before they do. And so there's improved R values in the wood because, again, you've densified the wood. So there's a number of different characteristics. And one of the biggest ones that's very visual is the color.
Sure. Yeah.
So those are some of the things that
Pine.
happen.
Nice caramelized pine. Here's some walnutty ash.
Yes.
My laptop is actually sitting on 4 blocks of 5/4 thermal modified ash right now, coincidentally. I don't know why they ended up there, but yeah. I've got a bit of African ayus, which looks a lot like teak now, that has been thermally modified. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And of course, the maples, we've seen baked maple for a while and caramelized maple, and I'll get on to your version of maple, your Obsidian product here in a little bit. It is really fascinating, and I want to underscore the stability thing and go back to your Thermo S and Thermo D thing. For most people, and this is what I tell, all the contractors and woodworkers I'm working with, is essentially you have an isotropic material now. It's no longer moving differently radially and tangentially. Well, technically it is, but it's like 0.1% different. So the TR ratio is now 1. And that's really, wood movement is not the problem. It's the differential in wood movement that really causes problems. But I mean, if I'm right, we're still talking like 0.1% tangential movement at this point. Like it's negligible. So we have a perfectly stable product, rot resistant, essentially nobody ever wants to say waterproof, but water resistant, highly water resistant. And it doesn't need a finish when it goes up outside. So it's pretty amazing stuff. So why bother? This is the thing with the Thermowood Association I've never understood. Why bother with Thermo S? Because is it just cost savings because it's quicker to produce?
No, not really. I'll give you a reason on Thermal S is that, and I might be giving away a trade secret here, but that's fine. But to be able to answer your question, one of the things is that if you're looking at doing like music instruments, for example, okay, what they're doing on necks, if you go to a Thermal D on a neck, it's too brittle. And so if you're slicing the lines to put your frets in it, like sometimes you've got they don't put fingerboards on it, like Ernie Ball, Music Man. They use it on the neck and they put their frets directly into the neck. It's too brittle, and it'll break off because that's one of the issues with going higher in temperature is that the wood becomes a little bit more brittle. And so if you're using real and doing projects that are real fine projects and you don't want that brittleness, that's important to be able to keep that temperature down and go to a thermal S. Sometimes also its color, because that 15 degrees C in difference is a substantial difference in color.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I've seen that with some of like Luna Woods products and things like that that are really pushing interior molded panels and things. And I know those are all Thermo S. Luna
yeah,
Wood, folks, is another Thermowood Association member out in
they're
Finland.
in Finland. Yeah,
Finland, yeah,
they're in Finland.
yeah. I almost said Estonia. That's the other thermal modified people.
Yeah, that's Thermo USA.
Yeah, yeah,
That kind of the name kind of confuses a lot of people because they think that it's being manufactured in the U.S. because
yeah.
that's the name. But it's very good marketing on that side. But they buy the wood here in North
Mhm.
America, but they ship it all the way to Estonia and then bring it back and put it into the warehouse.
Right. So this Thermo S thing is particularly interesting to me, and I'm kind of surprised that I probably should have known that because I've looked at the reports and the tests in the Thermowood Association handbook. But I recently built a dovetailed box. It was an urn actually for my mom back at earlier this year, and I used thermal modified ash for the substrate, and then I veneered it with a Zelkova over top of it. I made a tansu box, and cutting dovetails in that was fine, but holy crap, that stuff's brittle. Fine joinery was particularly difficult. Plus, compounded by the fact that the box sides themselves were only about a half an inch thick, a little scant of a half inch thick. And, it went together fine, but I don't think I would want it to have been a drawer, that had a lot of movement and a lot of dynamic range in it. It was essentially a closed box that, ashes went into. It was closed up, put in the ground. It wasn't going to go through a lot of issue there. But I'd looked at some of the numbers, and while you were talking, I pulled up, because I just happen to have the Thermowood Association handbook, free, like most people, sitting on my bedside table. And there are some significant MOR and MOE reduction numbers. We've always said that thermal modified wood on the Thermo D side of things, and frankly, there's not a lot of people that draw that distinction. It's thermally modified. Not a lot of people get into that exterior and stability side of things. But we've always said there's about a 20% reduction in stiffness. It's just a little bit more brittle. And what I tell people is this is a product that's used for cladding. It's used for decking. That 20% reduction really means nothing. As long as you're still putting things 16 inches on center for your deck, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of people, of course, the non-thermally modified people, the acetylated folks and the furfuryl alcohol folks, and we'll leave the brand names out of it. They're like, oh, well, we maintain our rigidity. And it's like, no one cares. Like, it's not, unless you're driving like Mack trucks over this thing, I really don't think, even then, I don't think it's really much of a difference. But when it comes to joinery, I've noticed it. I've definitely noticed it, especially with the thinner pieces below 3/4 thickness. It definitely, and to be fair, I've had contractors who've noticed it, like nailing up or stapling up cladding. If they're going through the thin tongue of a T&G or something like that, it will split, especially in your hardwoods. Ash is prone to splitting anyway, being a ring porous wood. So I've seen manufacturers who are now putting tracers on their tongues. Crush beads are being put in and things like that. So to make it as idiot proof as possible, because an errant staple or a screw that's not pre-drilled will split that tongue way, way more than ash all by itself. So this is to say, as you already know, I'm a big fan of the product, but it's not perfect. It's got some drawbacks to it, and it's interesting that the Thermo S is something that kind of sort of is resolving that. I imagine there's some reduction in MOR, but still, it's kind of nice to know that there is an alternative for those of us that want a stable product, and we can still do joinery with it. Because that's where your acetylized folks, let's just say it, that's where the Akoya people are trying to like make a play is, the door and window joineries. They're all over that. So do you know off the top of your head what the stability numbers on the Thermo S product is?
Not off the top of my head.
That's fine.
Right
Putting
now,
you on the
but,
spot.
Yeah, but the big thing is that like the music industry specifically, and I do a lot for the music industry.
Sure.
But everything is at a Thermal S.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So one last process kind of technical question, then I want to get onto the music industry because that's really why you're here. Tell me a little bit about So you're starting with kiln dried material. Do you kiln dry your material? You have a separate kiln for that than your
No,
thermo?
we don't kiln dry. I
Okay.
purchase it from mills that kiln dry the wood.
I figured as much. It's so much
Yeah.
easier logistically.
Yeah.
So you mentioned an open kiln system. We have open versus closed kiln systems. Can you go
Yeah.
into that a little bit more? What does that exactly mean?
Well, the difference between an open system and a closed systems are more like a pressure vessel.
Hmm.
And so they, you put everything in, you close it, and there's no exhaust, uh, there's no steam, and at least I don't think there's steam. I could be corrected on that, but everything is held inside. And what they do is that as uh, the resins and the moisture is evaporating from the wood inside a closed system, it's kept inside, and that's used to actually to change the wood at the same time. They use the acidity of the wood to be able to change it. And again, I'm not an expert in the closed systems. I can talk to day long on open systems, but we've one of the big things with the open and closed systems is that, um, for instance, when I was talking about a while ago, is that in our drying phase, in the drying phase, we bring it to zero, and then we are uh, once we're at 0% moisture, we start climbing the temperature to a thermal S and a thermal D. The reason why we want to make sure that at zero is a couple of reasons. One of them is that, as I mentioned, we're changing the wood at a molecular level. And if you think of your chemistry class way back in high school, or you might have taken chemistry after that, and the teacher or professor gave you 5 different elements, and he told you, he said, do not mix that one with this one. Well, or you'd
It's the
have an
first thing we
explosion.
did.
Yeah, exactly.
Took the
So,
sodium and dropped it in the water.
all right, you understand. So,
Yes.
but the whole purpose of making sure all the moisture is that we do not want to introduce another element
Mhm.
into that molecular structure change that's happening, because it's a chemical change that's really physically happening there. And so, if you've got a different element in there, you're going to end up with a different end result.
Mhm.
So, it's key to have it at zero. The other reason why you want to have it at zero is that as you climb the temperature, this doesn't work like a microwave. So it's not heating from the inside out, it's heating from outside in.
Right.
So what happens is that the outside will kind of make this jacket of dryness that won't allow any moisture out of the wood. It'll entrap the moisture inside the wood. And when the interior center temperature reaches the same as the out temperature, and you still have moisture in there, your moisture turns into a gas expands, and you'll honeycomb the whole inside of the
Right.
boards. And so that's actually one of the tests that we do on a regular basis. That we'll split a board and we'll look at it and go, okay, good, everything is still working well. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You're looking at it just to make sure. Where in a closed system, you don't take all the moisture out, and so it just personally brings questions to me on saying, are we actually changing the wood to the molecular structure that we want to, or changing it at to the same level as you are if you're in an open system? So
Right.
there's those questions. The other, on a operator side, yeah, it's interesting to look at that, because there's a major cost savings in looking at a closed system compared to an open system. Because in an open system, for instance, the pieces of wood that you showed me a while ago out of ash will be in the kiln anywhere between 90 to 100 hours.
Hmm.
Whereas in a closed system, they're talking about getting this done in less than 21 hours.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And
I was going to say 48. Okay. Wow.
no,
That's
we're
fast.
dropping it to 21, because my business partner went to visit 4 manufacturers of these kilns in Europe back in January.
Hmm.
And it was more because we were looking at a partnership with another group. We were really focusing in on the open systems. This other group, they were interested because the cost was substantially lower. So, and they were more accounting type people. they decided that, whoa, hang on now, there's an opportunity here to save millions of dollars. So let's go look at the closed system. So my partner, who is the guy that operates this kiln and understands it, he went with them to look at it. And and then when we got back, we compared both systems. And at the end of the day, the open systems to us was a much better operating process than the closed system. The closed system, not saying that it's bad, but to us, there was too many unanswered questions that couldn't be done. And then even lately, just as a couple of weeks ago, I got a call and we were talking about that. And this was somebody that had some knowledge about the closed systems, and they were saying that there was a substantial amount of waste. So now we're back to the roast. Do you want a 5-hour roast or do you want the 1-hour roast?
Right.
And so using that same analogy, so if the waste factor out of the kiln, and I was given a number of about 40%, if the waste factor coming out of the kiln is 40% and I have 0% coming out of one of these, at the end of the day, it might be cheaper, but if to purchase in the first place, but now your waste factor has gone up substantially and you're no better off than that. And then if you are getting it out in 21 hours and the way and you're paying a lot less for the kiln, I can't understand why they're the same price. But that's another story.
Yeah, well, that's marketing.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've experienced with both. From the working perspective, it is a different product, closed versus open. And from a highly technical perspective, you talk about the chemical transformation, the molecular transformation. You have a lot of raw hydroxyl compounds that have been extracted. All the hemocellulose that's pulled out of the wood leaves you with these OH negative compounds sitting out there that are so hungry to bond, and they're like universal bonders. Hydroxyl compounds will bond to anything. And the stuff that's in that closed system, it's extractives. So it depends upon the species, right? There could be, if you're doing a pine, or an ash, there's going to be different extractives that come out of that. But it's a lot of long chain organic compounds that want nothing more than to bond with those open hydroxyl compounds that's left in the wood. So when you vent it, you still have those hydroxyl compounds, and that's kind of, it's like acid and base. It's neutralized by the steam, because you've got this OH negative and you throw H2O in and boom, you get, more water, essentially. You get a stable molecule. The closed systems, it's not, like you said, it's not like they're necessarily bad, but there's so many variables. And testing has shown evidence of benzene rings, like nasty stuff, and it's small percentages. It still would be, CARB or TSCA compliant with off-gassing, but it's still so many variables that attribute to consistency, which you hit the nail on the head, falls to waste. And it's not, how do I put this? It's minor in many instances. Certainly the closed systems, the first thing you're going to notice, they smell a lot. And that smell does not go away readily. That to me is all of that stuff settling on the surface. And that's what you're smelling, those free radicals that are floating on the surface. You can wash it, you can finish it. It still has a smell. It will eventually go away because what's happening is that stuff sitting on the surface is bonding with other things in the atmosphere. But I have seen a workability difference. I've seen a brittle difference. I've seen an inconsistency from one board to the next. That's just quality control. And that's really where that waste factor comes in. And I've heard numbers up to 60%. 40% is pretty common from a wastage perspective. But depending upon the species, like one of the things that's kind of making waves right now is red oak. Because everybody's, we've got this ash product and the emerald ash borer. And I've had an entomologist on the show before to talk about that terrible bug. So red oak is like another option. Well, red oak, the wastage, I've seen 70% on some of these things because there's just all that tannin, all that extractive really causes issues when it settles back on and reacts with the wood. So I asked you a question that I already knew the answer to, but I really wanted to hear your perspective on it because it very much aligns with what I'm already seeing from the market.
Yeah. Well, you've and I appreciate you telling me all this information because my whole background isn't wood, and so now you're bringing a lot more information to me. So I thank you very much for that. So you've added
Of
what
course.
I know, but again, that reinforces the fact and the kind of back of the envelope exercise that my partner and I did when he came back from Europe of going through that, because when he first seen the first one, he came back and we're talking to each other every day, and at the same time, we really wanted to prove to our potential partner that going with a thermal wood process and an open process was a much better way to go, and because that's where our expertise was, and that's what we were bringing to the table with them. And so the first day that Pierre called me back, he said, "Oh God," he said, "listen," he said, "this is a very, very simple system. You put the wood in, you press the button, and you walk away. There's no controls, there's no nothing, and everything else." So that kind of adds to what you're talking about. There's no controls, but he said it's so simple. And I went, "Well, you're there, you're the operator. So at the end of the day, you're going to bring this information back." Then he went to the second place, and it was a little bit more complicated. And then the first one that he visited. But then what he started noticing was kind of gaps and stuff that where issues could happen. And so then it was like, well, maybe this isn't as good as I thought it was. And so there was kind of a roller coaster ride while he was touring. And then when we came back and sat down and we kind of put it up on the board and say, okay, what's the pros and cons here? Let's put it all out. Let's make a comparison. And then at the end of the day, let's see which way we want to go. And the decision was very clear that it was the open system and the Thermalwood process. The association did bring a level of support to the whole thing, but it wasn't the deciding factor. The factor was basically on the operation side, and we've been in operation for 17 years, so we've seen a lot of things and tried a lot of things, and I realized that this is probably it's a very expensive process. Like
Well, and I think that's at the heart of it. Like we talk about defects, we talk about wastage. The wood is still pretty dang good, but because it's a luxury product to begin with, if it has anything underperforming about it, and you're charging 4 or 5 times more per linear than the unmodified, actually that's probably a low number, sometimes 8 times more, it's really hard to justify that price hike if you've got anything wrong with it.
You're right.
Wood has always been low and slow. The more you speed up the drying process, the more you're going to screw it up. So it does. If you can't tell, I'm an open system fan. Everything that we personally stock and sell is open system stuff. It's interesting. I do think that there's a place for it. Notice that a lot of the closed system users, they have other product lines that are like parquet and mosaic type wall panels. And that's essentially what they're doing with the waste. They're chopping it up into the little pieces and gluing it back together. And it's cool. Like there's some really interesting stuff. Most of this is European companies I'm seeing doing this because there's a strong market for that type of just design idiom. So it's not like it's bad product and they're throwing it out. They're using it, but they don't necessarily trust using it in 18, 15-foot cladding boards or decking boards or anything like that. So I feel like we're being harsh on the closed system guys. It's a different way of looking at it, and it produces, as long as you can find a reason to use that waste wood, I think we're all happy in the end.
Yeah, if it ends up going to landfill, then that's not what we want to do. And
No.
And a lot of the I talk to a lot of people about different things, but one of the other advantages of the thermal modification, to add to what we said a while ago, is the fact that more and more people are being conscious of where the wood comes from. And exotic woods that come out of the rainforest are now, as somebody called me up one day and he said, it's politically incorrect to start looking at species that are coming out of there. So he said, we're trying to look for alternatives. And that's what it is. It's an alternative. And in addition to that, it's the fact that we can use some of our domestic hardwoods and put them in applications that we could never do before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Ash
kind
is a
of
perfect example. I
yeah,
actually think thermal modification is a good answer to the emerald ash borer problem too, because it kills the bug. There's no question. It's getting rid of
yeah,
that bug. And ash, yeah, I would never use ash outside, but I now have a deck of thermal modified ash. So yeah, it's good stuff. So this is actually a perfect segue into what species are you thermal modifying? Actually, let me rephrase that. Do you actually sell wood that's not thermal modified?
no.
Okay, that would be kind of weird considering your company's name is Thermalwood. But so, which species are you thermally modifying today?
Well, we've in the 17 years that we've been operating, we've actually treated over 200 different species of wood,
Really? Okay.
uh, and because each wood has its own inherent, if I can use recipe
Mm-hmm.
as the proper term, because and the recipe is really time, temperature, how you ramp up, all those things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of different variables in each recipe, but every one is different, and so. But the ones that we use the most, and our focus has been on hardwoods. This technology was designed, and if you look at all the Scandinavian operators out there, they're all pumping pine
Yeah, it's
and
all Scots pine.
into that market. When we started, we just had an affiliation with a couple of hardwood operators, and that kind of got us okay. Well, let's test this and try this. And when uh, the company that built our kiln came over here to help us commission it, we told them we were going to run hardwood. They went, all right, we'll start off the equipment for you, and then we're gone because we can't help you. We have no
That's
idea.
nice.
Yeah, we have no idea how to treat maple. We have no idea what ash is or what oak is, and we've done some birch, but that's about it. And so our main focus is all hardwoods. So we do a lot of ash that we put into a number of different product lines, but we do maple, we do birch, we do oak. We've done mahogany, and the mahogany has been basically going into um, door manufacturing. So there's a large door manufacturer that we work with that we make components for them in blanks. So then they finish them off, and what we end up doing with them is doors in maple, Douglas fir, and mahogany. But they've dropped the mahogany because it was coming from Brazil and it was getting very, very difficult to get. Seasons were different and stuff, so they've
Mm-hmm.
dropped that. We've treated that a lot, but we're doing Western hemlock now. So we
Okay.
have companies from BC that are sending us their wood. We treat it for them. We don't manufacture it into a finished product. What we do is we cut it up into the lengths, we cull it, take out all the defects out of it, wrap it all up, and then we send it to their customers either in the UK or the New Zealand, and it's turned into siding product.
Mm-hmm.
We do a little bit of pine, but it doesn't belong to us in most cases, just like this hemlock. Um,
Well, it's
and
interesting because it's kind of reflective of your forests. Folks who don't know, Thermowood Canada is in New Brunswick, Maritimes, not where most of the wood people think of in Canada is BC. The Doug
yeah,
fir, the Western red cedar, the hemlock. Um, when I do eventually retire, it will probably be to Maine. So I'm a very familiar. Been up to Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, been all over New Brunswick. Big fan of the area. But a lot of maple, a lot of birch, balsam certainly from a softwood perspective. But it seems like you're kind of reflecting your local forests, your local supply. Is that where you're sourcing, other than the hemlock? Are you sourcing locally from, at least
we
from the
source,
Maritimes, or?
we source locally for a lot of the maple that goes into
Mm-hmm.
the music industry, like the figured woods,
Mm-hmm.
like maple, curly maple, and all that basically comes out of New Brunswick. But with the volumes that we're using of ash, we need to go outside. because
Sure,
there
makes
is
sense.
some ash in New Brunswick, but it's more the southwestern side of the province, and they don't differentiate it and pull it out or separate it out. It ends up in a mill in Nakwik that's turned into fabric,
Okay.
and so we don't even see it. And so
Interesting.
there's no, I can't call anybody up in New Brunswick and say, hey, I need a load of ash.
Yeah.
I just can't get it. I can get maple and birch, but the other problem that I have with the maple and birch is that I can't get long lengths because the mills aren't set up to do anything longer than 8 feet, and so that is also an issue.
Hmm.
There's one mill, for instance, in Metagan in Nova Scotia that I can buy ash from on a regular basis, but I can't get anything longer than 8 feet. So you bring it in. If you have an end check or whatever, now you're down to a 7 footer. If you
Hmm.
got a defect in it, you're down maybe to a 6 footer or smaller than that. And everybody's looking for longer lengths. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they've been spoilt with composites that come in 20-foot lengths or whatever length
Hmm.
that you want. And there's very little installation to put in a long board. It goes faster. And so that has created kind of a behavior that we should be able to get long lengths.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
but
It's been one of the biggest market detractors of thermal modified wood because they are tend to using some of our domestic species. They can't touch Ipe when it comes to 20-foot, 22-foot lengths.
yeah,
Um, and things like in matching and gem joints and things like that have been kind of a response to that. But I personally just think the North American market needs to suck it up. Like, just
yeah,
just start to recognize that it's okay to use a 6-foot board. 6 foot on cladding is a little hard to deal with, but yeah, it's something that's inevitable. We have to adjust. We can't, the number of people who call in and I've got a X thousand square foot deck and I want all 15 foots. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't fill your order with nothing but 15 footers. You're going to get random because you can't do that.
yeah.
I want all 20 footers, and we have been spoiled for centuries with super long, and the Western red cedar market hasn't helped from a cladding perspective. But
Oh,
now
yeah.
Western red cedar, my God, this stuff's expensive. It's one of the most expensive woods on the market,
Yeah.
and it's there's so much Western red cedar. Don't get me wrong, but the Doug fir is choking it out. It's one of the reasons the Western red is getting so expensive. Is Doug fir is just hardier, and it's kind of taken over all the replanting that was Western red cedar after we did bad things in the 1800s. Let's admit it. We all did bad things way back when. But the forests are super healthy and chock full of Western red now, and it turns out the Douglas fir naturally letting it run its course is winning out, and hemlock for that matter. So
Well, that's
yeah,
where the Western hemlock is coming from. Is that now they're taking a species that, and it's a big thing. If you talk to a lot of people in British Columbia, they're looking at the Western hemlock potential of thermal modification, and then turning it into an alternative for Western red.
yeah, that to me is probably the most exciting species to come out of the thermal market right now. I have high hopes for thermal hemlock. I've actually featured hemlock as a species on the show before. I'm a big fan of the wood because it's got two worlds. It can be the SPF construction grade stuff, but it also can be the highest end CVG fine combed, however many growth rings per inch, just beautiful stuff. And there are
Mhm.
manufacturers out in BC that are creating just unbelievable looking hemlock. But when you thermal modify it, it kind of takes on a look like teak. It's got that honey brown look to it. And I've
Yeah.
got architects who are really excited about, it's darker, certainly, but maybe they don't want the walnut look of thermal modified ash. It's too dark. They want that white wood look, and then they see it looks like teak, and they're over the moon. So all the mid-century designers, a lot of the more contemporary lines, they're really excited about this. I think that could be one of the bigger movers in the market. Ash is always going to be a mainstay. Red oak is probably going to be in there because they kind of sort
Yeah.
of look the same. I mean, red oak's a little bit darker, but I'm probably the only one who notices the difference. So I'm kind of excited to hear that you guys are doing hemlock as well. Even if you're just modifying and shipping it back, the more we can get on the market, I think the more
Oh,
following we'll
absolutely,
get. Yeah,
absolutely, and and
and it's
and
long.
Oh yeah, we get some beautiful pieces, 20, 22 feet long, and
Yeah.
it's great to be able to do it. It's really easy to fill up the kiln with this because we do have some products that like this past week we received from one of our clients 10,000 dowels. Now, sticker those things that are round and get them ready to go into the kiln is a challenge in itself. But
Yeah.
and when we started doing these things, we probably did about 500, and then that market is starting to grow. The client told me yesterday that to expect that we will get 75,000 dowels next year,
Wow.
and this is for pool cues.
I was just gonna ask if it was pool cues or umbrellas, one of the two.
Yeah, it's a pool
Wow.
cue. It's very, very stable, and they're
Yeah.
all out of
Yeah, that makes
nickel.
sense.
Yeah,
And man, that would be gorgeous in a pool cue too.
yeah,
And then put a
yeah.
little bird's eye section at the top with a nice obsidian band at the ferrule. That would be really cool.
Oh, never mind just the band. I started talking to him yesterday about the Obsidian as the butt end
Yeah.
of the of the pool cue.
Excellent.
So,
Well, there's our perfect segue. Let's talk about Obsidian. You have a product that I think is unique. I have certainly heard of people thermally modifying maple. Lots of people have thermally modified maple. Lee Valley did it in their chisel handles when they first came out. That didn't go real well for them, but it's to varying degrees and color, but longtime listeners of the show know that I'm a big fan of talking about tone woods. I studied music in college. I've guest hosted on the Omo podcast where we talked about tone wood when it comes to violin makers. And one of the things any luthier out there, any musician in general, they're always talking about alternate materials because we've been using exotics for centuries, and now we have the science to molecularly change these woods and change their tonal properties, their working properties. And this is what you've done. You've created an alternative to ebony for things like fretboards in the guitar industry. So tell me about Obsidian. What's the marketing pitch on Obsidian? Cool
well,
name, by the way.
yeah, well, thank you very much. The Obsidian actually is a combination of two different processes, and we kind of it was an accident to start with that we came across the process, but once we did, and then we started looking at how we could link this and how we could connect it to a market, then things started to grow. But what it is basically is that we take thermally modified maple, and we can use any species. I'll talk about that in a second on other species. But what we do is that then we take the thermally modified maple. We put it into a pressure vessel, and with a combination of different resins, and I can't give you the secret recipe, but with a combination of different monomers or resins, we infuse the wood, and then what we end up doing is that we pull it out and then we cure it in place. So we end up, that's a beautiful picture there of a guitar. This is, I can never get them right anyways, but this piece here that I have that I'm showing right now, let me get right in the camera here. This is a real piece of ebony. This is a piece of Obsidian ebony. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little bit darker than the original piece. This is it's not black. It's a very, very, very dark brown, whereas this piece here is black. If we look at weight and density, we're definitely looking at about the same stuff. I got the industry to test it, and the industry came back and told us that it had the same tonality, had the same density, workability, and it was a great alternative to ebony. But we can play around with it. That's one of the beauties. We can, this piece here, I don't know if you can tell, but it's blue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we got Fender to build us a guitar last year, an electric guitar, with all wood that came from northern New Brunswick. So poplar body, curly maple top on the body itself, a curly maple neck, and an obsidian ebony, but blue curly maple. So you've seen the curls and stuff. and it's just absolutely gorgeous. But we can play around with colors. So then when we talk about pool cues, now you can have maple, but you can make it red, you can make it blue, you could do some greens, you could play around with it, but it's real wood. And so that's one of the things that people are very interested in. It is a real wood alternative. There are a number of other alternatives out there, but they're it's either they're using some type of a product that is modifying the wood when they're going through it, and a lot of the alternatives out there are softwoods that they have. There are some out there that they've taken residue and sawdust and cardboard and everything else and crushed it together and have come up with a product that was supposed to be for countertops, but most of it is. But then they cut it up and they make fingerboards with it. There's some plywood type of applications where it's thin layers of wood that they're using. So there are other alternatives out there, but as you were saying in your research, you didn't find anything else like it. It's because we're using a real wood alternative, and then we're using the thermal modification to allow the resins to flow even better into the wood when we put them under pressure.
Yeah, I imagine so, because you have a very dry product at that point that's got space, especially in a species like maple. I mean, I know you say you can use really any species to do it, but maple is so dense. There's not a lot of dead air in there to begin with, which is one of the reasons that some of the early baked maple things didn't go real well because it became so brittle. But yeah, I mean, I think if you were to go back 50 years and look at like the Gabon ebony then, you might have a similar color profile to what you just showed. But and that piece of ebony is gorgeous, grade A, top notch, finest to finest ebony that we get today. But it's not that same jet black look.
No, absolutely not. And we've had one of the big players in the U.S. that has reached out to us. They tried the Obsidian ebony. They came back after they did all their tests and they said, yes, this works for us. But in the meantime, we're sitting on a very large inventory of ebony that we can't use. It's blotchy. It's different if it's a streak, but they have these blotches in them, and it just looks terrible. And so they asked me if I could help them and see if there was anything that we could do. And so we did some testing, and we actually, what they're calling it is ebonizing it. They've asked us if we could ebonize their ebony. And so we did it, and it works. It works beautifully. And so here's another opportunity to be able to turn inventories for some of these companies that use large quantities and have accumulated product that they couldn't use for years. Send it to us, and we'll. As Tomas from Ernie Ball told me this week, he said, "You're the ebony janitor. Clean up on aisle 3." But we can clean it up and give you another product that can be usable, and then it doesn't end up accumulating or eventually end up in landfill somewhere because nobody could use it. And on top of that, being a fact that a species that is going to be extinct at the rate that we're using it, and you throw stuff out, they kind of, to me, is wrong, and so we need to look at it. So there's an opportunity there to be able to do it.
I had to change your lower third there. That you need to put ebony janitor on your business cards. That's fantastic.
Well, you kind of said that, and I was laughing about it. I said, "Well, clean up in aisle 3 or aisle 6. We'll take care of it."
That's fantastic. Well, I mean, what a fantastic just service to that market, because Bob Taylor made waves years ago when he talked about we need to get used to not using jet black ebony. There's so many logs being left on the ground. So fortunately, Bob Taylor's kind of influential in the guitar market. He was able to start lowering the bar, we're changing the grade. So there are a lot of companies. I sell to a lot of luthiers that have a lot of streaky ebony. And there are some products for it, but what they end up being is on the lower end of their product offerings. So lower price point, obviously. And it's not really a tonality difference. It's just that's an area of the guitar specifically where you don't want distraction. There are a lot of companies sitting on very, very large inventories, because really this less than jet black ebony, the market that Taylor created for it has been going for 10 years, maybe more.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a lot of ebony sitting in warehouses that's being picked over and cut down, and now there's littler and littler pieces left. And yeah, that's pretty amazing. Well, kudos to finding that niche.
I had never, seriously, this is again accidental, right? I had never really thought about cleaning up the waste ebony that's sitting out there. It wasn't even part of my vision of where we were going. We were bringing an alternative.
Yeah, it's a little off brand, right? We're going here. Yeah. Don't use ebony.
Yeah, but when I was first approached to do that, I went, whoa. It's one of those things you stare at sometimes and you don't see it, and then somebody else comes in and lets you know. I was doing an interview the other day on my Northern Heat report with Gabriella Logan, who writes for Guitar World magazine. And I mentioned to her because she is a huge advocate for sustainability, and she's trying to work with all these big players in the US to get them to think of exactly what they're doing, and let's save the planet rather than just destroy it. And when I mentioned to her that we were doing this, she said, "Oh my God," she said, "I've been talking to these guys for years about sustainability, and they've been kind of brushing me off, and now they're coming in and they're wanting you to do this. This is just amazing." So she was pretty excited at the fact that was starting to happen. And so there's, we get all our heads together, we'll be able to figure things out.
Well, and we hear this term sustainability a lot. And I do continuing education classes for architects through AIA a fair bit. And they always want to talk about sustainability. And some of it is we need our lead points and things like that. But for the most part, everybody wants to be doing the right thing. And what's interesting is sustainability is not necessarily about not using the wood anymore. It's using all of the wood. There is so much waste due to grade and width and length specifications that, trees get taken down and, the best stuff is cut out of the log, and then there's a pile of stuff that's left over. This is rampant in the white oak market right now. All anybody wants is riffs on white oak. That's what's in the design zeitgeist. That's all anybody cares about. You can't put a gun to somebody's head to have them buy quarter sawn white oak. That used to be gold. And now I have probably 25,000 feet of it just sitting there. Nobody wants it. And this is the problem. White oak is not going anywhere. There's white oak everywhere. But if we continue to say we have to have just ribbon, that could be a problem. It'll take a long time for white oak to be affected, but that's the path it's going down. And that's what's happened with ebony. That's what happened with Pernambuco. That's what's happened with mahogany. Name a CITES listed species right now. There's not there's not very many trees. They're not endangered. There are certainly some species, but those are not Appendix 2 species. They're just not being managed properly. They're being cut down, and there's all these boards that aren't making the grade, literally. Sustainability is just using all of the buffalo. The more that we can put that log into production and into a product, the longer that individual log stretches. And it's so funny. That's the key. Just being more efficient with what we're already doing means we won't have to go back and get more. And that's the part that I'm constantly trying to get across to architects is don't be afraid necessarily. This is a blanket statement, but don't be afraid to use tropical wood. In fact, not supporting that market can actually be worse. But just make sure that you're using as much of it as possible, using it efficiently.
Yeah.
Be flexible on your grading. Be flexible on your length and width spec. In fact, embrace those things because you're using wood. Why would you want it to look like plastic? Why would you want it to be perfectly homogeneous with no grain showing? Like, you're designing in wood, lean into that, you know? And I think the more that we can talk about this from a perspective of using more of what we have rather than avoiding it, I think we'll all be a lot happier in that respect. There's my preach moment there.
But it's interesting, and this is something that we've just discovered of just lately, and that we could do ebonize our ebony and be the janitors, but like you said, there's a lot of waste material sitting out there, and so if we can get the word out to all those people and let them know that there is a way of being able to use it, we'd be glad to help them out with that issue or that problem. So
without obviously you have intellectual property on this process, but I imagine you could do, you're essentially blackening or blue blackening the wood. Can you do other colors? Could you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Could you clean up the mahogany market by making it, redder? Could you eliminate sapwood and walnut? Essentially, the sky's the limit, right? It's just a matter of what's the size of your production line? How many more production lines can you generate? So I guess, what's the future of thermalwood? Can you do more with this? We'll just call it the Obsidian process. And can you be the Ebony janitor and the Kumru janitor and the Ipe janitor?
Why not? It's all about seeing what we can do, and I've always been innovative. Like, the wood industry is an old, mature market.
Yes.
And it's been around for a long time.
That means stubborn, by the way, for those who don't get that that subtext. It's a stubborn market.
Yeah. Well, I had Robin Boucher from Boucher Guitars tell me one day that we've done so much in the music industry to shift the paradigm in a short period of time. He said, you don't realize, he said, I've been in the business for many, many years, but he said, you don't realize the impact that you've had of being able to shift that whole industry. And because it's growing every day. A lot of people are noticing it. Like Boucher Guitars, at this point, he was telling me that 80% of his guitars now are built with, and the music industry called it torrefied, not totally modified, but torrefied. And so 80% of the guitars that he builds are torrefied, and 100% of that stuff we do it for. And so, and he said he doesn't understand why everybody else is not doing it at this point in the time, but like you said, it's a stubborn group.
Stubbornness.
It takes time, but it has grown over we started 17 years ago, and we were probably one of the first ones to introduce it into that market. And at first it was, we maybe sold 20, maximum 40 guitar necks a month when we first started off. And now we're treating 15,000 a month,
That's
so
awesome.
it's gone. And then the other part, and this is one of the markets that we're working on now, is to grow the independent luthier side. Because we end up, our kiln is a 30 cubic meter kiln, so it takes about 12,000 board feet. So I can't make smaller loads, so I get, let's say you've got 25 sets of Sitka spruce tops that you want to get done. I need to be able to sneak them in there somehow with another music grade. And then you got to think about, well, what's the recipe? And most of the time, we're doing a full load of maple in there. So we got to take into consideration, well, we're sliding it a little bit more. We got to make sure that you take the longest schedule or recipe, not the shortest one, and you try to find everything that matches. So it gets a little bit more complicated if you're trying to mix and match. But for the small luthiers that have smaller quantities, they want to get into this game. you got to wait game because
Mm-hmm.
I wait till I have a massive load. And so we're working on rectifying that. We placed an order last week. I got to sign the papers. They're sitting on my desk here to purchase a 3 cubic meter kiln.
Okay.
The reason is that I want to be able to offer to that selected group, uh, an opportunity to treat their wood any day and
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
wait till I have a big load. Because if I don't have a big load this month, well, you might have to wait till next month to be able to do it. And it just causes them headaches. I hate to see people waiting because we can't do it because we don't have the right capacity to do it. So my partner and I decided that it's a market that we really want to go get and that we want to be able to help grow that side of the market. But the only way we can do that is be able to do smaller batches.
Right.
So that film is like I said, it's the trigger was launched last week. We should be getting it in operation by April of next year. So it's a long. It's about 6 months, but
That's pretty good these days, actually.
yeah, yeah. But it's still that amount of time, and but that's what it's going to be used for is to.
That's
And I
fantastic.
have, yeah, and like I have. I was in discussion with Gibson the other day, and they were talking about doing the sides of acoustic guitars. And they said, "How good does it bend?" Not really good. We were talking about brittleness a while ago. Well, that's one of the things when we get into acoustic guitars, sides and backs aren't an issue. The back and the top, I should say, the sides become an issue because you've got to round them to be able to make them work. But we have done some in the past where we were sent the pieces that were already curved. And then what we did is we made a mold to go into it, and then we clamped it to it so it wouldn't move. Well, I can't do that in a big kiln. We've done it
Right.
just because
Yeah.
we had room, but in a smaller kiln, I can do that every day.
That's kind of what I was thinking. With the smaller kiln, you've got more R&D capability. You can play around a little bit more, and yeah, you don't want to heat up a giant
Yeah,
kiln full of dead air.
yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting because now there's so many other little things you could do with that.
Well, just think about us having a kiln that's 30 cubic meters, and those 200 different species that we did weren't all truckload. So it was
Right.
like take a chance. You mentioned white oak. Uh, we did some white oak for a client at one time that was doing flooring out of white oak, and it was actually gorgeous
Really?
when it was beautiful. And his was quarter sawn, so all the lines were straight, and it was gorgeous. The figure in it was gorgeous. But when we first got it, we went oak, yeah, red oak, white oak, yeah,
No.
yeah, exactly. Well, we
No.
weren't, exactly. So we put it in, and we didn't have a reference, so we put some in with the same recipe as we would for red oak. And remember when I told you a while ago about if you entrap any moisture in the wood, it's going to
Yeah,
blow up
you
inside?
case hardened it like crazy, didn't you?
Oh, my God. What a mess we made. We split it in half, and when we opened it up, we could have used it as a bowl
Yeah.
because everything inside was completely destroyed. But that what was happening was that the resin pockets weren't releasing,
Hmm.
and we had to lengthen the schedule. Instead of being 90 hours for red oak, we were almost 150 hours for the white oak.
Yeah.
And so we're almost double the amount of time in the kiln because my analogy to that, I tell people all the time, it's like washing your dishes. You leave the house quick in the morning. You had a nice big breakfast with a couple of sunny side up eggs, but you didn't scrape up all the egg yolk. And then you ran out of the house on a nice warm day, and this stuff caked to your plate. Well, when you get home, you try to wash it, and it doesn't wash that easy. Well, what do? You soak it till the next morning. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. You
Yeah.
know, we're
Yeah.
soaking the wood a little bit longer than normal just to make sure the resin pockets come out.
Sorry, I'm still I'm still thinking about all that poor white oak. Wonder what product we can make out of that. I don't know.
Yeah,
You could
well,
infuse some
not
resin in it and sell it as bulb blanks, I guess.
yeah. We didn't do a whole pile of it, but it was enough to tell us though this was a big mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. I'm excited to see where Obsidian goes. I'm excited to just see how you use that process to clean up other species. Thank you so much, Bob, for your time. Tell everybody, like, how do they find Thermalwood Canada? How do they buy your product?
Well, go online, www.thermowoodcanada.com. You can call us. We're in New Brunswick, 506-548-9126. You can reach out to me directly at thermowoodcanada@yahoo.ca. You can go on our website. There's a contact number up on the top right-hand corner. And the other thing, too, while we're talking about contacts, if you could lower that down just a little bit, I noticed something there that just above the contact tab there's a virtual tour. So you can actually do a virtual tour of our facility. And
this is
it's
really cool, by the way. I had a lot of fun with this the other day.
well, it's like an arcade game, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's super fun. I like this.
we have, I think there's 135 different targets. Those little targets that you're looking at now, if you click on any one of them, they open up into a video, or they open up into different things, information. It could be written. Most of it is video. But we just want to give people an opportunity to learn more about the process.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was actually going to reach out to you offline and find out how you did this because it's just really neat. That's something
the same technology that they use for real estate.
Yeah, that's where I've seen it before. Yeah, places like Zillow and stuff, especially that dollhouse view thing. This floor plan, really cool.
The big difference is that in a house, Matterport system is basically a tripod with a camera that turns 360 degrees, and you move it 3 feet every time you take another shot, and then you just let it run and it goes through and you move it. And in a house, you would probably do maybe maximum 30 shots. This one was well over 300 shots that were done all the way through the shop so that we could get this all done.
That's really fun. For those of you listening to audio, you just got to come to YouTube and watch the video, or just go to thermowoodcanada.com. That's a really cool virtual tour. It's fun to see. You know, you've got a woodworking shop in there, stacks and stacks of lumber. You get to see your kilns, all that fun stuff. So it's really cool. Bob, thank you. Thank you for your time. You've been really generous. We've been talking for more than an hour. Probably could talk another hour about tonality, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. The one thing I will say about torrified, you're right. They call it torrified. It's a really bright sound. It's loud, and it's gaining waves really fast, especially in the solid body guys. But as a tone wood in your acoustics and things like that, I've known violin makers using it. It is an incredible sound, to the point where I don't know, maybe the violin section could start overpowering other sections of the entire orchestra, although they do that already. It's a really amazing sound. But, you know, you're always going to find that stubborn guy who's like, no, I want my twang back. I want my mahogany. You know, I'm a Beatles fan, or, you know, something like that. But I think that this is here to stay. I think the more you experiment, the more we're going to find other ways to use this just in the music industry, let alone some of the really stubborn folks in the cladding and decking world. So thank you for all the experimentation you're doing, and thank you for your time.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for bringing me on your show. We really appreciate it. The more opportunities we have to let people know what we do, and it's great.